Good morning, everyone. I'm back again for another constitutional talk. You know, we sent 55 men up with the idea of amending the Articles of Confederation. Some left, some stayed, some came back, some went again, some weren't happy with what was being discussed, so they left. But in the end, we had these 40 men here that signed the Constitution. And that's what this whole idea of the painting is. Now, at the end of the convention, you had a lot of different people giving speeches talking about they thought this was the best they were able to do with the diversity of the men they had. And the delegates ended their convention, and they were left with a couple of cleanup items they had to do. George Washington, for instance, he wrote a letter to the President of Congress. And then his secretary, Jackson, he wrote a letter that was to go to the ratifying conventions. And I just thought today that I'd pick this up and I'd read it to you and explain a little bit of what's being said here. So the first is a letter from the Constitutional Convention to the President of Congress. And I'm reading from a debate on the Constitution, part 2. It has a lot of speeches and things. But let me get back. Okay, a letter from the Constitutional Convention to the President of Congress. In convention, September 17, 1787. Sir, we have now the honor to submit to the consideration of the United States in Congress assembled the Constitution which has appeared to us the most advisable. So he's telling us that this is really the best they thought they could do for the country, and that really this is the document that we want to proceed with. The friends of our country have long been and desired that the power of making war, peace, and treaties, and of levying money and regulating commerce, and the corresponding executive and judicial authority should be fully and effectively vested in a general government of the Union. So he's talking about what we need, that we need commerce. We need to regulate commerce. We need peace. We need treaties. We need judicial authority. So he's explaining to us what he thought was best and why we should approve this document. But the impropriety of delegating such extensive trust to one body of men is evident. Hence results the necessity of a different organization. So he's telling us that we needed to leave the Articles of Confederation, and we need to go with a whole new document. And so that's why we've produced a whole new document here. It is obvious, impracticable of the federal government of these states to secure all rights of independent sovereignty to each, and yet provide for the interest and safety of all. So they're talking about what we would have to give up, because the Articles of Confederation does give states sovereignty. And so in effect, they're operating different countries with a united front for the purposes of defense. Okay? And he's telling us that we must provide for the interest and safety of all. So we must all agree to come together. Individuals entering into society must give up a share of liberty to preserve the rest. And that's really the point here, is some liberty must be given in order to secure the rest. The magnitude of the sacrifice must depend as well on situation and circumstance as on the object to be obtained. It is all times difficult to draw with precision the lines between those rights which must be surrendered and those which must be reserved. So he's telling us there's really a difference in what should be kept and what should be given up. And he's giving us the reasons why and the immense differences within the different colonies. So with each one might lose something here or something there. And on the present occasion, this difficulty was increased by a difference among the several states as to their situation, extent, habits, and particular interests. So the differences, the important positions in Pennsylvania and New York might be different from those of Georgia and South Carolina. Okay. In all our deliberations on the subject, we kept steadily on our view that which appears to us the greatest interest of every true American, the consolidation of our union, in which is involved our prosperity, felicity, safety, perhaps our national existence. And that's really the point, because if we don't agree, then we go back to this sovereignty of different states, and we're leaving behind a national unity. The consolidation of our union, in which is involved our property, philosophy, safety, perhaps our national existence. The important consideration, seriously and deeply impressed on our minds, led each state in the convention to be less rigid on points of inferior magnitude. Constitution, inferior magnitude. They might have been otherwise expected that the Constitution which we now present is the result of a spirit of anonymity and of that mutual deference and concession which the peculiarity of our political situation render indispensable. That is, that it will meet the full and entire appropriation of each state is not perhaps to be expected. So everyone will not be an equal winner or an equal loser. It depends on the circumstances of the state. But each will doubtless consider that had her interests been alone consulted, the consequences might have been particularly disagreeable or injurious to others. That it is liable to a few exceptions, as could reasonably have been expected. We hope and believe that it may promote the lasting welfare of the country so dear to us, and to secure our freedom and happiness is our most ardent wish. In other words, we're trying to achieve a common good amongst all the colonies, not just the individual one in which they individually came from. So it goes on in closing. With great respect, we have the honor to be, sir, your Excellence's most obedient and humble servant, George Washington, President, by unanimous order of the convention. So Washington sends this letter to Congress, explaining himself and the entire convention, and telling Congress why they did what they did. And that's what's really important here, is giving them an indication of what we have. So this is sent up there with a copy of the Constitution. Then, or Delegate Jackson, Secretary of the Constitutional Convention, writes, resolutions of the convention concerning the ratification and implementation of the Constitution. So here he's giving direction which will go to the states, to the nominating or to the ratification congresses, which will be set up. In convention Monday, September 17th, 1787, present the states of, and he lists the states, resolve that the preceding Constitution be laid before the United States in Congress assembled, and it is the opinion of the convention that it should afterwards be submitted to the convention of delegates, which would be our ratifying convention, chosen in each state by the people thereof under the recommendations of its legislature for their assent and ratification. So he's asking that Congress send it back to the states and that they set up a ratifying convention and that they go through it and decide what to do with it. And that each convention assenting to and ratifying the same should give notice thereof to the United States in Congress assembled. So he wants them to go through it, and then he wants them to report back to Congress once they've made their decision. Resolve that it is the opinion of this convention that as soon as the conventions of 9 states shall have ratified this Constitution, basically 3/4, the United States in Congress assembled should fix a day on which electors should be appointed by the states, which shall have ratified the same, and a day on which the electors should assemble to vote for the president, and the time and place for commencing proceedings under the Constitution. That after such publication the electors should be appointed, and the senators and representatives elected. So what he's telling us is that after the 9 states have ratified, we are to begin a process of setting up a new government. That the electors should meet on that day fixed for the election of the president and should transmit their votes certified, signed, sealed, and directed as the Constitution requires to the Secretary of the United States in Congress assembled, that the senators and representatives should convene at that time and place assigned, that the senators should appoint a president of the Senate for the sole purpose of receiving, opening, and counting the votes for president, and that after he shall be chosen, the Congress together with the president should without delay proceed to execute the Constitution. By the unanimous order of the convention, W. Jackson, Secretary, Governor Washington, President. So following the convention, Jackson has sent an order to Congress to send the document on to the states to organize a ratifying convention in each state, to report back the results of whether they would approve the Constitution or not. And once 9 states, 3/4 agreed to it, then they would begin to establish a government. They would hold elections of the House and Senate members, and then appoint a president of the Senate, and that the electors would vote and bring it sealed as defined in the Constitution under the section on the Electoral College. And they would choose the president, have him sworn in, and they began setting up our government. And the president of the convention, George Washington, writes to the head of Congress explaining to them why this Constitution, why we did not follow their directives and just amend the Articles of Confederation, why it was necessary to have a complete change. And that's really what was important there. They had some real big decisions to make, and they went along with it. And with that, I'd like you to just get a better idea of what they were up against and why they did what they did and how important this document really was. And we'll talk again in the next Constitution Talk. You have a good day. Bye.